In this video, we're going to look at the stretch and squeeze toolkit within the well tie component of the TIPS well log modeler. We're going to continue with an example we had previously, and I'm going to pull up, we have a well log that's been modeled in a region where we have a lot of coal beds, and we have a seismic line that we've pulled into our model, and I can right mouse on that and hit select show seismic line, and that will load the seismic file and place the well synthetic at the location that we had prescribed earlier. And as I move that over in front so that we can properly see what's going on. So we've got our seismic data. The information regarding the seismic data is at the top. So I have the name of the file, and then the number of traces, the number of samples per trace, and the sampling rate and the total time. So this is the synthetic that we've captured near this well log. We've placed in the well synthetic that we had extracted a wavelet from the seismic data and applied to it, and we've shifted it to make sure that we have our formation tops matching at the top. And then we've also determined in the past that if we model this synthetic with primaries plus multiples, we get a really good tie. Now this window being shown right here in orange is our cross correlation window. This is where we're judging the quality of the match for this particular well with the synthetic. Now the information regarding the cross correlation is shown down here. So cross correlation over this time range currently is a really nice value of 0.741. And as we make changes to the model, to the synthetic, that would update if we put a different wavelet on it, if we shifted it, if we changed the phase. All that information would update into the correlation coefficient. Now we're going to talk about stretch and squeeze here, and I'm obliged to make the disclaimer or the comment that people should not just do stretch and squeeze just for the sake of getting a good match and being done with it. It's really important to understand why you might be stretching the synthetic. Do you have attenuation, whether it's intrinsic or scattering, that you need to be concerned about? Is that in your data? Does it should you put a Q value correction on the seismic data? In essence, squeeze the seismic data and use the sonic that's in the well log as the guide as opposed to what's in the seismic data. This is really up to the individual, but we generally like to promote a stance of you don't just stretch and squeeze to make something fit for the sake of making it fit. It's really good to understand why. That being said, we're going to look at the toolkit to see if we can improve the well tie, the synthetic in this range. We're really just worried about the area from the top of the coal to the bottom. So when I have this particular synthetic up with the seismic data, I go to the well tie menu option at the top, and we have something called the stretch and squeeze toolkit. And I will click on that, and up pops this window where you can define the areas that you want to apply stretch and squeeze. Now if I slide this over, we see we're looking at the same time scale top to bottom that we currently have displayed on here. The area in the gray, these are the 3 seismic traces to the left of the synthetic. We are showing the single synthetic, and again, our current state that we're basing this stretch and squeeze on is a primaries and multiples synthetic, and we can see our formation tops highlighted here. And we get a nice visual. If we want to zoom in and on this toolkit, I'm going to slide this over here. You hit the zoom button, and that'll zoom in a bit, and I can hit the up and down arrows, or I can use my mouse wheel to scroll. And as we make changes, and I can also adjust the gain for the seismic data, and that down or that up, and the well data, just so that I get a nice visual for this level of activity that I'm going to do. But you're also looking at this zoomed in quite nicely, so you can see how good of a well tie we want. And the current correlation coefficient down here is 741, which is what we had computed earlier, because we have not done any stretch and squeeze yet. That information is there. So that's the general layout of the stretch and squeeze toolkit. Now, when we want to apply a stretch, we always start towards the top, and then we move down. If you put a stretch or squeeze zone above another one, it actually will turn them off. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But I'm going to look to see, I've got a nice, if I look at this tie, I'll say right here, I've got this peak event coming across, and that's a nice tie. And I can see this trough is maybe that's off a little bit. So let's see how we would stretch that. So when you want to add a zone, so we create stretch and squeeze zones, you simply come anywhere in here where you want to start and you do a mouse click. And you don't have to be exact because it will change it. So I'll hit click to add a new zone. Now what we define is the base time. That's the time on our synthetic where we're gonna fix the synthetic at that point, and then we're gonna give it a time where we're gonna move our from point. So this is on the well synthetic. So from a time, and we're gonna move it to a time that corresponds to the seismic. That's going to be our stretch and or squeeze. And some default values in there. We could type them in if we want, but for now, just hit accept. And let's go over. So this is a zone. This is what a zone looks like. So the red line across the tier, this is our base point. That's where we're fixed in time. This blue line, this is our well from point. So this is the point that we want to move it from. And then this blue line is a seismic 2 point. So we're going to move whatever point this is to match up with this one, leaving this red line and everything above it stationary. Now, right now, this zone is not defined and it's not turned on. And there's a little power button next to each zone, and I can click that. And if I click it, and we're going to worry about the actual match, if I click this, it applies that stretch. So I'm going to move this point down to here. This is a random, and when I do that, I get my correlation coefficient updated on here, and you notice this turns to green, letting me know that that zone has been applied. So that's in the toolkit. Now that obviously was not a real good move that we had, because we've made our situation worse, but we didn't really get what we're after. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to take this trough and we wanted to move it just slightly to that line up with that trough on the seismic data. So here's how we defined it. Now I turn it on, and you can see how that applies that stretch. Now you can also see that our correlation coefficient actually got worse because we moved everything down. And this is where you can get in the game. All right, I can move this down, I can go down, move things up a little bit. And whether that's the right thing to do or not, I'll leave that up to you, but we're going to show how we can do that. So I'm going to turn it back on, and now I've just applied stretch to it. Now what I look at is I look down here, and because I've moved everything down, maybe I should squeeze things back up a little bit. So let's, fix the data up here, and we'll apply a squeeze to it. So I'm going to click right here, just below it, and just hit accept. All right, so I'm going to say that this point is good, fixed in time, and then I'm going to come down to this peak right here on the synthetic, and I want it to line up with this peak. So I've stretched this bit down here and it moved everything else down. Now let's move it back up. Okay, and if I turn this one on now, okay, it can see my correlation coefficient improved a bit from what it was. Still not as good as what I started with, but you can also see how that ties it. Now if I go up top, let's say I have both of these zones turned on. If I turn this one off at top, it will go down and turn off every zone below it, because it doesn't make sense to apply one down here because you've changed the signal going down. But at this point, and if I turn this on, it will turn on everything above it, because it'll apply them in a descending sequence. So I can continue to go down here and play with this, and I can you can see them down here at my cold base. I need a little more gain on the well. Let's put it up there so we can see. And I'm just playing stretch and squeeze games at this point, and I could say, let's fix this trough right here. Let's add another zone. I'll fix this trough and hit accept. And I want to go from, we'll say this crossover, see where the peak crosses over to the trough, and I want it to line up down here. So a little stretch there. Now I've improved my coefficient to 714. If I slide this out of the way, and remember, we started with 741. So we're tweaking, we're making changes. Not necessarily we haven't made anything better, but if I zoom back out, I can see I've applied these three zones. Now, if I don't want to apply the stretch and squeeze, I say, yeah, it was a nice try. It didn't really do much for me. I hit the clear all button, and it will remove all the zones and we'll go. Or I can cancel and it won't apply these. If I hit accept, it then takes it and applies that stretch and squeeze to the synthetic, and you can see our new cross correlation coefficient of 714. Now, one of the things that is important is to know where we apply the stretch and squeeze, so I can have a visual at any time. And there's an icon that shows up here next to the formation tops, and if I click that, you get these small arrows here. And again, we didn't make, I couldn't zoom in and show, but you can see where we've gone or from to information, so that stretch and squeeze is there. If I want to look at this and say, all right, am I better off with it, without it? What does it look like without the stretch and squeeze? I can go to well tie. Now that I have a stretch and squeeze, there's a box here that says apply the stretch or squeeze, which it currently is applied. The other thing that we'll always see, recall the depth time information used to create the synthetic is always down at the bottom, the very bottom. So depth time log start, no check shot, we have applied. Stretch squeeze correction is applied. So that if you take a screenshot of this, not only do you have these red arrows turned on to see that you've applied the stretch and squeeze, but you also know from our depth time correlation relationship down there that is done. If I want to take it off, I very simply go to well tie, because this is a well tie activity, and I uncheck the apply stretch and squeeze. And keep an eye on the correlation coefficient and these red tags in the actual synthetic. When I turn it off, the synthetic goes back to where it was before. And then if I go to well tie, apply stretch and squeeze, it applies it again to show that information to you. Now, one last thing that we'll do is when we do the stretch and squeeze, what we're doing is we're taking the sonic that was used to handle the depth time transformation of the synthetic, and we're taking that and we're just adjusting it in those two zones. So we get a new sonic, and if I want to see what that sonic looks like, I go to well and I look at depth time controls. Okay, and I have a button down here that says we're using the check shot correction, and if I hit on my depth time chart button, I'm going to see what this sonic looks like. And this is what the sonic looks like with that stretch and squeeze applied. And if I took it off, it would be slightly different. Now, granted, we didn't make wonderful changes and big changes in this for the point of just showing how to use the tool. But if you have bigger changes, you would see that in the depth time. One last thing you can do is if you go to well and you say set the current depth time as default. Okay, so what I'm doing is with this particular well, we have no check shot applied. We have put these stretch and squeeze zones on, and we had shifted the whole synthetic down by 124 mils to begin with to get our first formation top match as well as the phase. But I can say set as default, and then every time I go to do a synthetic, that is my default depth time that I can apply every single time. So you can save that and reuse it. You may or may not want to do that. So that's fundamentally how the well tie, the stretch and squeeze toolkit works within the well tie. Again, finally, if I want to get rid of it, I go to well tie, I go to stretch squeeze toolkit, and I hit clear all. And it says this will remove all the zones. Are you sure? Before I do that, the other thing I can do is I can just, let's say I just wanted to get rid of that last zone. I click on that, and it says delete the stretch zone with the base at 1.9. Yes, delete it. There it is. Or I can hit clear all. You sure you want to get rid of them all? You bet. Get rid of them all. And I'm going to go back to here, and now I've got my synthetic match going forward. That's how the well tie works within the stretch and squeeze toolkit works with the well tie. We hope you enjoyed this session.